Nestled in the backseat of my blue Corvair, wondering if it might be time to come on for air. The feeling of her lips and the smell of her hair. It's getting hard to breathe, but I don't care.
Hello, and welcome back to the second episode of TV3's Movie Interviews. And today I've got Eric Player here, and he's the president of Panther Pictures, and he's been making movies for about 30 years. Today we are going to talk about 3 movies that Eric has had a role in. Stay With Me, Moment of Anger, and More Money, More Family. Stay With Me, which was filmed in Fargo and written and edited by Eric, is about a divorcing couple who end up stranded on the side of the road in cold winter weather after hitting a deer, and they have to spend the night surviving and airing out their issues. Moment of Anger, which was filmed in California, and written, edited, and directed by Eric Player, is about a man who in a fit of emotions runs out on his wife, only later to discover how much he needs her. More Money, More Family, produced by Eric Player, and also filmed in California, is a comedy about 2 cousins whose families hate each other. And to get their families back together, the 2 cousins decide to fake winning the lottery and plan to host a family barbecue at which they will pass out the money. Will this work? Or will it anger their families even more?
Hello, Casanova the Ghetto speaking.
Look, Playboy, I got it. I got the plan.
What plan? What you talking about, man?
Look, a way to get our family back together. Your mom, my mom, everybody.
So Eric, how did you get into filmmaking?
Oh, well, I started, if I go really far back, I was 6th grade, I love to write things. But I started Panther Pictures right out of my undergraduate, which was in screenwriting at Brigham Young University. And I just enjoy sort of the way that you can take just an idea, next thing you know, it's on it's on the screen after a little while. It's been something that when I was graduating from high school, I was always into writing, I always loved old movies, and going through the list of majors and find out, wait, you can write for movies? And kind of went from there.
So talk about the conception of your projects, from making a Moment of Anger so quickly and then having all the delays on Stay With Me, and how it affected the way you worked.
Well, I generally sort of sit with an idea, sometimes it seems like, anyway, for a little while before I see a way that I could turn it into a film or short. And with Moment of Anger, it was an actor that I'd known for several years, all the way back to film school, calls me up out of the blue and says, "Hey, I have an empty spot in my reel. I need to get. My agent wants me to update myself a little bit. Do you think you could come down and help me put some fake commercials together?" I was really all he was thinking of, and yeah, sure. We talked about it, and I got off the phone. And then the next couple of days, I started thinking, well, here's an opportunity. Somebody wants to work with me. Somebody I've worked with for a long time that I like. We really don't have to do commercial. We can do anything.
Yeah, why not make a movie, right?
Yeah, and there was actually an old hotel in the town I was living in, Porterville, California, Porterville was right there on the way to the Sequoia National Forest, and they had been sort of the big pit stop for it in that part of California, but that had been 30, 40 years ago, and the place had just gotten kind of run down. Portions of it were closed completely. The pool is empty. It's still right out there, but it's in this real thoroughfare of the town, so it's sort of this blight right there. But I always thought it just looked cool.
That's the Paul Bunyan Motel?
Yeah. Paul Bunyan was called. And so I just thought, well, what about shooting something there? And then from there it was like, well, what's the story? And I just had the thought about some of the worst days I've ever had have usually been when I'm fighting with somebody that I care about. And I thought, well, what if we do a story around that? But you take it to the absurd extreme, He storms out and then spends the rest of the day at this hotel because he can't go home. But he just realizes he made a horrible mistake, and he's got drug dealers mistaking him for their people. And
so we might as well stash ourselves here, dude.
Yeah, I don't know you. I'm pretty sure you got the wrong game.
You don't deal for Stanley.
I do not.
Neighbors seeing him, what are you doing? So that was the initial idea, and so this was February, and by the mid-March, we were down at the hotel filming it. It was just because it started with this real sketch of a story, and then the two of us talked about it, and I like that because you don't have time to second guess yourself when you do it that quick. It's just something that hits you, and you think it'd be a good idea, and you go for it. On the other side of that, Stay With Me, which had just filmed last fall at the Boston Film Festival, I was pretty happy to get that, was a story that I wrote in film school, nearly 20 years ago at this point, and I had just gotten out of a bad relationship when I wrote it. Yeah. And it's one of these things where you have all these things you wish you could have said to the other person. And for me, I always think of it in writing in terms of the perfect conversation, the one you didn't have. And I got thinking about having that conversation, but then I couldn't think of how to get out of it once it was over. I wrote down all these things that you want to say to the person, but it's always awkward after that to move on. So I just figured I'd kill the characters. So I wrote it as somebody who freezes to death on the side of the road. And at the time, I'm living in California and not a lot of frozen places, but it was still a story I really felt strongly about. So I actually dipped into some of my student loan money at the time and prepared this whole huge production. I actually bought a car for it so we could have them film in it and then beat it up later, and just did all this planning. But it was that experience where I learned that you really do some things really do need planning. You can't be spontaneous. I had the best in my area, the best sort of empty road I could find was on El Toro Marine Base, and they allow people to come through and be on the base, and so it was all areas that it looked like I actually took a tour of it beforehand. Looked like, oh, this is gonna be kind of perfect. I can just put in some wind sounds and shoot it just right so that it's like because deserts get cold too, and that was just kind of my thought there is that I could make it work, and so I hired the actors. I got a investor actually even who wanted to help out with it and set it all up, but I had to, of course, make sure the base was okay with it. So I called them up and said, well, who would I talk to about I'm going to film something? And they put me in touch with the lieutenant, who is who's the guy who's the liaison to the public for media and everything. And I explained what I was trying to do. This is a short film. I want to use some areas of the base to put the car. Probably take us a couple of days, and not a big deal. And he's like, "Oh, hey, that sounds like a fun little project." And I said, "Yeah." And I was still a student, so they like to work with college students on that thing. And so we got it all set, and I show up. Pardon me. We show up on the day of filming, and the guards at the gate knew who we were. They're waving us through. Hey, how's it going? Look, have a good time. We had that big truck pulling. There was this little Volkswagen Beetle that I bought for $700 on Craigslist, and all our other equipment. And we're going in, and we get to the area that we want to film at, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere on the base. And the next thing you know, you start hearing these sirens, and these jeeps start approaching you, and gets one on either side, surrounded, and there's MPs in there with their guns. And what are you doing here? And our problem was that the lieutenant had never passed on to his colonel that, hey, guess what's going on? We're going to have these people filming here. So he didn't know who we were. He didn't know what was going on. The radar had pinged us out there, a place we shouldn't be. And we were rounded up and sent back down the road. They didn't detain us, but you're not staying. and so all that money that I'd put into it, all the time that we'd all set aside for it, I had just the night before filmed a scene in a bar that takes place as part of the movie But that's all the footage I ever got of that movie. That was early on in the conception of that story, and that was one that I couldn't just quickly do. It had to shelve it. A couple of years later, actually a good 8 years later, I had somebody approach me saying, "Hey, I got this story. I got this budget. I'd like to do a short story. Do you have anything?" And I told them about it, and they liked the idea of the story too. And they, I gave it to them. Say, "Hey, have at it." But then they had an illness and some changes in their own. That's what happens with finances, and they didn't do it. And so the third time came along in 2020 when I got a hold of actually the same actor friend from Moment of Anger and some other people and said, "You know what? I'm tired of waiting on this movie. It's not like anybody out there knows that that it hasn't been made yet. Why don't I make it again?" And we got everything together. I hired a cinematographer and again had a scout of different areas that would work. But this was 2020 and February. This was February. I was making the plans. March comes along and nobody's doing anything. So it wasn't until we moved here to Fargo, and I'm like, well, this is a place that's got cold. And it was a couple years into the pandemic. By this time, they'd made all these different standards for what you have to do if you're going to film, and we had to register a COVID specialist to be on set at all times.
Is that a compliance officer?
Yeah.
I saw that in the credits.
Yeah, COVID compliance. Yeah, their whole job is to at the beginning of every day, reiterate what the standards are for people and make sure everybody, if you're not on set shooting, that you're off set with a mask and everything. And it was surprisingly complicated, but we got it done, and that was our final. We finally shot it in the winter of 2022 to 2023, and then put it out on the festival circuit. And actually, but the thing about that talking about taking a long time to get a story to go, is when 2020 came along, and I was about to, we were ramping up then. I was looking at the story, and I realized all those feelings that I'd had when I first wrote it about, feeling so justified in what had happened in my relationship before. We're kind of clouding the the whole story. I noticed that the guy spent a lot of time unloading on the girl, but she didn't get a whole lot of time to respond. She'd respond sometimes, but usually it was something that seemed to sort of validate his view of things.
It could be an interesting dynamic, though, if she can't get that word in.
Yeah, and so what I did was I didn't completely change it, but I said, she needs to be able to get a couple of jabs in too. She had a view of this relationship that he didn't have, and that we need as an audience to see that she's not just some horrible creature that had betrayed him. And so being able to have that much time to marinate on the story and life experience made it so that I could. I really felt like I gave her some reality and some real depth after that.
Never fix anything. You just collect things that are already broken.
Broken like you? Or like me?
Like us, John.
So one thing I wanted to ask is, for A Moment of Anger, you wrote, directed, and edited that. And then for Stay With Me, you wrote and edited it, right?
Right.
So what was the collaboration like from being a writer to having someone else make it, and how did that come together? That's
a great question. I wrote both of them, but I decided Stay With Me, still going back to when I originally wrote it, was I was too close to it emotionally, I felt like. That someone else needed to interpret what I was saying in a little more universal way than I knew that I would. I still felt like I probably would do a little too much of not being fair to the girl. But at the same time, I knew that I was close enough to the story, and it was a story I wanted to tell. That's why I wanted to edit it. He's a director. He's done some more. Most of what he's done before is sort of some film noir shorts. Somebody suggested him as I was doing pre-production, and so we talked, and he was attached to it all the way back to 2020, so we had a lot of time to talk about it after it fell apart the first time. And it's nice having a team that cares about the same thing you do. In fact, it was actually the actress who called me about a year and a half after things had fallen apart. So when are we going to do this movie? I really want to do it, and nip me in the bud enough to get it done. But I find that there's a lot of, the whole point of making a film is to kind of communicate not only what's happened to you or what the story you're telling, but through universal ways that we all feel about things. You're the only way to connect really in a story is to find a way to make it more universal. That's why Hollywood seems to make a lot of the same stuff sometimes, but it's not just that. It's not just them trying to go with an IP that's that's familiar because it's an easy money thing. It's also because when there's a shared experience somewhere that when we've all got an emotional attachment to, that creates the interest in this story for the next sequel or for the remake or whatever, because there's already some sort of bond there. And especially nowadays, as things really are more fragmented, there aren't too many things that we all have an emotional attachment to. So that happens and that's, movie theaters are there to make money, so they try to find something that they can guarantee that with. But all of film is an emotional connection, telling a story, and you want to do it in a way that everybody understands. So if you're working with another person and you can see that the way and the two of you can understand each other, that's going to translate to making a movie that is also going to be understandable to other people. That's how I find
if the writer and director both can kind of connect on that same idea, you've got something.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're together on it, then it's going to connect to somebody else too. My wife, I call her she's the best audience I have. I watch a movie with her. She immediately connects to a lot of things, so I know that then the stuff that I'm making, if I can get a reaction out of her, the kind I was hoping for, then I also know that it's going to be the same when it gets out there.
I think at least what I took from the movie is how people just don't communicate what they need, or maybe don't know what they need. And then over time, it can get a lot worse. But then it's funny how extreme circumstances will finally force people to see what really matters. So that's what I took out of it. Is that kind of what you were going for?
That's pretty much what I was going for. That you can be so focused in on what you think is wrong, or what you think is just, or what you think is fair, that you actually don't see anything beyond what you think is fair and what you think is just. And I still go through in life moments where I kind of have this epiphany where I thought everybody saw it that way, or I thought, honey, I thought you saw it that way, but you just weren't even trying, and something comes along and makes you realize that you need to step outside yourself.
You are important.
Not important enough to show me that you cared, or that you would want to talk about things, or tell me you were drowning too. You never said anything.
This story is kind of supposed to be a microcosm of that. The ending theme for it was written, of course, 20 years before I made the movie, but it, again, those things are universal.
Yeah. There was one line where, he has this list, and she's like, "That's your list, not mine." She's like, "Well, you're the one adding to it." That was funny.
In my life.
That's your list, not mine.
Okay, that's news. So it's my list of my faults, huh? Because you're the one who's always adding to it.
Was that something like a personal experience that
a little bit, and that was a new. That was part of the new script. That I hadn't mentioned that. Yeah. That hadn't said it that way, at least in the original script. So that's one of those ones that after you've been through a marriage, you realize a little bit how that dynamic works. But yeah, that was one of my favorite ones too. There wasn't a whole lot of humor in it, but there was that, because sometimes the things you fight about are kind of ridiculous.
Right, they don't really mean anything, but
Yeah.
you just got to get the word in.
Yeah,
right?
and it was important that exchange happened before they thought they realized there was kind of a doom coming up. You know, it wouldn't have quite landed the same way if it was during the time that after they'd run off the road. So, yeah, spoiler.
What does that say? Where are we?
It says nothing. Because we're nowhere!
What was the phone number on the because like was that actually something they could call? Was that something?
What it was when we first in 2020 when we started scouting, I wanted to write it a little bit to where we ended up filming it, and so we found a spot on the side of the road. It was actually on an Indian reservation that they had. It was a lot of filming is figuring out locations and figuring out what locations you're allowed to use. You know, so sometimes you have to adjust. And in this particular spot we found, it was this rolling hill, and it was kind of a nice spot, but it was still. I think the story came together when it was supposed to, because it still wouldn't have quite sold as being so forbidding that these people aren't going to be able to survive. But anyway, the area that we were there at actually did have a no trespassing sign with a number on it, sort of an incomplete number on it, and so I added that little portion because our director too at the time in the original version, they don't get out of the car. They go off the side of the road and they're stuck in such a way that, because I originally imagined it in the mountains, you know, in a snowy mountain area. And so the idea was that maybe they were hooked up against a tree and couldn't get their doors open to get out, and part of the problem. But the director, Eddie, was right to do it. He said, you know, they need to get out and talk about their situation and try to decide whether or not they're going to walk off into the weather or if they're going to stick around. And so it was them being out of the car and knowing that they would see the things around them that I wrote that in. But yeah, the one that ended up in the movie, we didn't have anything. And so I just, a nearby telephone pole, that's actually a clipboard for the script supervisor. We just jammed it in there, wrote a few numbers on the back, and that was all we needed to make the dialogue work.
So when we were chatting for the interview, you said something that I really liked about how a lot of the things we don't do is because we think we can't. Has that ever happened to you in your career? And then how have you pushed through that?
I think that's a really, for me, I feel like attitude is a lot of stuff, and that's a very Lego movie thing to say, but there's a lot of truth in it, in that there is especially nowadays, and I would say this to anybody that's thinking of becoming a filmmaker. There is so much available to the low-budget person that there wasn't a few years ago. Even when I was first studying screenwriting, this was in the late 90s, the only prospect was going to be that if you could find yourself a 16 millimeter camera and enough money to pay for the film, otherwise you're just going to, you really have to rely on a studio or some other kind of patron to afford anything. Now you can peruse. You'll find some things that you could use at a secondhand store, especially at an old photography store, because everything that was state of the art 20 years ago is just sitting there now. And especially when it comes to the sound side of things, there's so many ways to record the sound, because you need to record it separately. That you can get high quality, even if it's old tech. And I think that in that way that you're really only limited by your ingenuity and your motivation, because and this applies to so many things, but particularly in independent filmmaking. The other thing I used to tell, I would mentor some high school students a few years back, and when they would bring us in and interview them, help them with resumes and things like that, and see what they want to go into. And a lot of them wanted to go into film, and that was why I was there. And I would tell them that the really most important thing is, what do you have to say? What is your story? Whether it's a fun something that you wrote, or it's a documentary you feel like has to get out there. That audiences respond to those. They aren't going to really care if you shot it on a 1080p versus an 8K camera if what they're engaged with is something that interests them. That's how you make the movie. The tech is really secondary. The guys selling you the cameras are gonna insist that that's not true. We talked about this before the interview about how there's so many things getting made where they use these high fidelity, high frame rate cameras, but it ends up being more of a distraction when you're trying to put it together. And one of the best little horror shorts I ever saw was something that this guy in France made. It was at the Newport Beach Film Festival with another one of my movies, and I'm sitting in the theater, and he puts it on, and it's very obviously been made on a VHS camcorder. Yeah. But it was so, it's like, well, what's going on? What's going to happen? I didn't care. Nobody cared.
Because you were into it.
Yeah. And that, I think, is people just need to stop limiting themselves. Like, well, I don't got enough money. I don't got enough equipment. You got friends, I'll bet. You work here. I'll bet you occasionally they'd let you check out a camera or two. You can find ways. Yeah.
I filmed a lot of movies on that thing. That's what I've got. So. Yeah. But no, I was talking to some guy the other day, and he wanted to make movies, but he's like, yeah, I don't have the right cameras, or I don't have anything, so I can't do it yet. And I'm like, even your phones these days, if you have nothing else, they're pretty good.
Yeah, my phone's a couple of years old, and I just recently discovered that it's got a 8K function on it.
What, 8K?
Yeah, you fill up the entire memory, especially if you already got stuff on it, in it looked like, I stood it in 8K mode at 60 frames, and I think immediately its estimate of how much time I had on there went down to like 10 minutes for the entire phone. But it was there, and you can do stuff in 10-minute clips and move them off the phone before you move on to the next one. It's just that kind of thing. Yeah, you're right. You don't know what you got sitting around you.
Yeah. So with both Moment of Anger and Stay With Me, you have these quotes. I think one's from Mr. Rogers, I think. I believe Fred, And then Moment of Anger, I don't remember the quote, but
I find that for my own filmmaking, there's some I haven't, and especially if I'm collaborating with somebody else and that's just not what they feel like doing. Yeah. But if I'm telling a story, I want to get in the head of the person, of people watching it, the feeling of the overall sort of theme and also the overall just tone of what they're about to see. So I like to include quotes at the beginning. There's one that, we're not talking about, called Political Fallout, that I made. It was more of sort of a religious story of the idea of, people talk about the Messiah's coming back, but it's usually in the context of, well, you just wait, Messiah's coming back. And people say that a lot of times. And so the slogan on that one, the tagline was, we all think the other guy deserves it, but we're all the other guy.
It's true.
and it's about how comes back, peace is on earth, but nobody's happy about it because they all thought somebody else deserved something else, and they're like pointing fingers at, how come they get to be forgiven? What's going on with that? And it's just about that the earth ends up just kind of rolling back into destruction because nobody was satisfied. Yeah. And I used a quote at the beginning of that, how often I would have gathered you, but you would not, and before it came up. And so that's sort of the thing. That's what I like to do with the quotes. Yeah.
One before Stay With Me, I have it here. It says, love is at the root of everything. All learning, all parenting, all relationships, love or the lack of it. What made you, that fits the movie pretty well, but what made you choose that?
Well, when I was a kid, I'm part of that generation that watched a lot of Mr. Rogers. Yeah. And
my dad loved him.
And when you're a kid, you don't really, you're not thinking deep about anything. You engage emotionally with so much stuff more when you're a child, I think. Yeah. And I just remember Mr. Rogers was somebody that made me happy to watch. Because I felt like I was whatever was gonna happen, I just innately knew I was gonna relate to it, in a way. Sesame Street was fun, and I loved Bert and Ernie, and Electric Company had a lot of, crazy songs that helped me remember how to pronounce the letter R. But Mr. Rogers was talking to me,
But the toughest thing is to love somebody who has done something mean to you. Especially when that somebody has been yourself. Have you ever done anything mean to yourself? Well, it's very important to look inside yourself and find that loving part of you. That's the part that you must take good care of and never be mean to. because that's the part of you that allows you to love your neighbor.
And so I never forgot that. And then, honestly, it was, there's that long gestation period for this particular movie. And Won't You Be My Neighbor came out back in, I think it was 2018.
But the movie with Tom Hanks, or
no, that's the one that they did, a couple years ago, where his life story. But this was actually a documentary using all clips from from him himself, from Mr. Rogers. It's called "Won't You Be My Neighbor." It was at Sundance and did pretty well, and you could find it on streaming. And that used, just went over his whole life in a lot of ways. I haven't seen the Tom Hanks one, but it was just ways that it sort of showed you who he was, and he gives that line in the movie, and that resonated with you, because when you're an adult, it resonates with you at a whole different level of how important the people coming up in the world are. Those kids are going to be, and you need to realize that these are people that and they're not just objects, they're not just cute little thingies. People make their YouTube videos, and they're cute, he's running around in this, But this is going to be a person someday, and you need to treat him like that. And that's who Mr. Rogers was, and what I always thought. And the idea of love being so important, and it's something that you notice when it's not there. It just fit.
So for Moment of Anger, you have so many locations in that movie. Like you have the motel, and there's also a hotel entryway, and grocery store. How do you go about getting all those places?
It's funny. For one thing, a lot of those locations were right near each other, and some of them are all within the same hotel. Just take a different spot, take it from a different angle. That's one of the things I would first stress, is that you get a location that only one person you have to deal with in terms of negotiating it, and find one that meets your needs in a lot of ways. That cuts it down. I found that if you approach somebody on the same actor friend of mine is producing his own show right now, and he called me up and says, "I need help finding locations. I need the Eric player touch." And it's because it's one of the things that I learned I was good at in film school too, was that getting somebody to understand on a personal level, hey, I'd love to tell this story. I think what you have will help to frame it. What can you do for me? People go in there and say, I want something for free, or they go in there and say, how much if the first words out of your mouth are, how much would it cost to film here? They're going to start thinking, well, how much could I get? So I find that if you just approach things, I don't know, like you're talking to a buddy at across a restaurant table, you get a lot of everybody wants to be, maybe go back to the love quote, but everybody wants to be just sort of leveled with, I think, a lot of times. And that's how I did it with locations. So what I've always done is, and then you don't want to rip them off, but you don't want to overpromise. So what can you afford? What do you think is fair? Say that to the other person, and generally I found that they'll take it. I got that whole hotel for the price of renting out the room that he's in when we're filming it. They gave me free reign of the entire place, and that's because that's all I asked for. But then they wanted to be nice and help out, and they, you're here, you're paying us for a room. Why not go around the property? And what do we care? And so that was, and then the grocery store that he's in. That one, they were happy to let us use it. It hadn't been remodeled since the 70s. Funny thing is that they've done that since then, so I'm glad I got in there when I did. But they were happy to let us film there and have time. We had to go in early before they were officially open. But their one caveat was they didn't want screen credit.
I saw that in the credits, is that the grocery store is unnamed.
Yeah, because I guess I don't know if they had this idea that I was so huge that they'd be a pilgrimage of people. This is
a good business, but I don't know.
But at some businesses like it, Palm Tree, they wanted people to feel a little more legitimate about them. They understood that I was basically going to film them as a seedy hotel, but they were in the middle of remodeling, and they wanted, so they wanted to be named. But sometimes, and you don't have to insist on. I guess the way I'm saying with that is that you never know what the requirements are going to be to use a place, but don't go in there thinking that it has to be one way or another, because you just work with what they want. Yeah. So, yeah. And you know, some of those shots are stock footage. Some of them are where I got permission to be on the hill, but you know, I only got 10 minutes to make the shot, so make it count, kind of thing, and stuff like that. That's what I do.
And I liked what you said about trying to make a connection with someone and then just going right to them and saying, I want to film here, and how much is it? Yeah. I like that.
Yeah,
that's a good advice.
It's because you set up, the film industry, even at this level, has a little bit of a, starry eyes attached to it sometimes. When somebody finds out you're making a movie or filming something, but so it actually get further in terms of you as a filmmaker trying to get something done if you can sort of break that down a little bit and not approach them as, hey, I'm going to do you a favor, or even stressing the idea of what you're doing being, movie making so much as storytelling.
So what's the story of that dog running around the motel? You saw in the credits that you said like something about a mascot. Is that anything to do with that dog? Or
that's the dog.
Oh, that's the dog.
His name is Oreo. I think he was about 1.5 years old in that shot. He's my dog.
Oh, it's your dog,
Yeah, he's always been amazingly good dog. You didn't have to have him on a leash. He's got a breed in him that is very, sort of homebound, and so he doesn't want to go too far from me. So it worked out great. I would just sit the camera down and let him wander until I got a good shot, and it helped to sort of the lonely feel of the place. Helped with that.
I really liked that shot. That was one of my favorite shots in the movie because it had this hard look of maybe like, I don't know, a movie from the 70s or something like that. How did you capture that? Like, what did you shoot it on? Or?
Well, it was on an older Sony camera, probably not much more high tech than this one. I don't know, but I had a good cinematographer who knew what settings to put on that, And for me, it's, and then it goes back to in post-production, just what kind of look are you looking for? I mean, it's another one that they have, and for all the filmmakers out there, DaVinci Resolve is a really good editing that's free. Completely free. A lot of times it's the tools that you have that cause you to see, okay, well, so this is what I have, and what can I do with it? Again, it's what have you decided to tackle?
So you have this old car. It's a Buick, I think, right? Or
the one in Moment of Anger?
But it's in both movies, right? Or is that this different car?
Well, actually, the Buick. It's a Buick in Stay With Me, and it's a Corvair in Moment of Anger. And I actually own a Corvair. I got it outside. And my goal is to try to put an older car, usually a Corvair, in anything that I do.
Wondering if it might be time to come on for air. Feeling of her lips and the smell of...
So the songs for both of these movies, were those original songs?
Yes. I have there's two ways that I get my music and try to make sure that I get them as high quality as I can. Just you meet people and you know people and you just remember, because you never know if 10 years from after you come across that person that you might be able to help and get some help from them. And then and this is one for filmmakers. There's a lot of really good resources on this. It's called the Free Music Archive. It's a website. It's not. I would venture to say that a lot of these places that you're paying a subscription for, and I've got a couple of sites that I pay subscriptions for content, post-production content. A lot of them are getting it off of the Free Music Archive.
That's kind of stealing, isn't it? If they're just taking it off of the free one and charging you for it?
It depends on the agreement that they make with the archive. But you can go directly to, I think it's fma.org, but that's what I use a lot of. And there's artists on there from all over the world who are they're just making money, making music because they wanted to have it heard, and they provide a license on there. Stay With Me, the background at the bar, that's something off Free Music Archive. And but two of the main songs on Stay With Me, the one at the beginning and the one at the end, are by the same composer, who we both went to the same film school, and so again, your networks. This had the same film network, and so I got a hold of that. But then actually my favorite songs in those two are the ones done by the 17-year-old girl. That's actually my brother's daughter. So and she had done this little EP that I used a couple songs for on Moment of Anger, and then there was a third one all these years later that seemed to fit for Stay With Me. I asked her every time, and I gave her screen credit, and she's like, "Oh yeah, sure." It's just, all I'm saying is that in the resources, especially when it comes to filmmaking, you never know what's going to be useful later. So if you think something's cool now, you write it down. Cliche being that it's all about who you know in filmmaking. It works on the level, Tom Cruise level, and it works on our level too.
I'm gonna pick up my guitar, fly down to Los Angeles.
So this shaving scene in Moment of Anger, that was my favorite scene in that. How did you do that? Make that scene? And there's that slow like zooming shot, and there's like banging on the background. It's very ominous. And
that's all filmmaking magic. You put it. It's again. You can. Some of this stuff anybody can do. First, I told him, okay, this is the scene where the drug lord that's been, sort of in the background this whole time is finally going to lose his patience and come after you. So first, you're just working at the sink, getting ready for bed. Go. Yeah. I told him to just, so he was having all that fun in the mirror and stuff like that, and just making faces, and then the banging. None of that's happening in the hotel or at that door. Yeah. We shot a picture of the door. We did the thing of him hiding and on the side. And then later on, when I'm putting it together, I got a friend of mine, the same actor who'd been after him, and then also for the drug lord, just a friend of mine who was a big guy. And I took him and put him in a little closet that I had converted into a soundstage with a microphone. I said, okay, now bang on the walls. Yeah. and just start. They made up all the stuff they were talking about. They knew that this is what's going on and this is why you're there. But beyond that, and I do that a lot of times. I have a quote from myself on my Facebook page. If you poke a few years back into the background, it's not like it stays there. But where I say, I know what it says in the page. Don't tell me what it says. Tell me what it means. And yeah. I mean, I want people to memorize their lines, but sometimes, especially when it's two actors together, if one actor gets all nervous that he didn't say buttress, I can't respond until he says the word buttress. That's it. I said, no, don't do that. That the point here is for you for you and he to leave the room. When he finally leaves the room, you follow him. You know that you're supposed to talk about whether or not Ernie is green or if he's orange. You're arguing about that. Don't wait for him to say the word orange. Just, you jump back if he gets to the end of if he's obviously at the end of his thought, you jump in, whether or not he said the word you're looking for or not. And it's that kind of thing. I think if you have people just made aware, it's a lot of times it's the emotion over the words. Yeah. So I just told him, hey, you're mad that he's been avoiding you. Go. And they banged on the walls, and I recorded that. And then with the push in, I was kind of inspired by It's a Wonderful Life in that regard, because it was where I filmed the whole thing with him and then realized afterwards that, wow, that was a really emotional moment for him. We should have seen more of his face. And there's a story of in It's a Wonderful Life where Jimmy Stewart, before he goes off and decides to jump off the bridge, he's drinking at the bar and just kind of praying to himself, and then he gets punched and he thinks, oh, that's what I get for praying. But during that moment, he actually cries, genuinely cries. And the shot that they were doing in that moment, Frank Capra, the director, had no intention of pushing in and was just going to do a hard shot.
Because he probably didn't know it was going to happen.
Yeah,
right?
and even Jim didn't know it was going to happen. And so they had that moment, and it was really emotional. And he's like, oh, dang, that was great, Jim. Can you do that again? I wasn't ready with the camera. And the story is that he looks and goes, you want me to do that again? I can't do that again. That's just what I did. And so Frank Capra then, this is old school film. He went back to the studio and he developed the film, and then he went through every individual still frame and blew up little by little to make the push in that you see in the movie. And I basically did the same thing with easier tools.
So a lot of the movie for Stay With Me was like in a car. Yeah. How did you manage filming all of that? Because that's hard to film in a car like that.
It is. Well, we had, and this is another thing of people and just sometimes just asking, my guy that did the location scouting for me had a friend who owns the Red. In fact, they talk about him on the radio of Stay With Me. We'd like to thank Mike Argel. That's actually the name of the manager over at the Red on 13th, the gas station. And they have a garage next to them, a huge repair garage, three-door, supposed to be for an old auto shop that's not there anymore. It's just next to them. And he let us in there, and we just pulled the car in, surrounded it with lights, actually wrapped it in cellophane, and then did all the filming inside the car that way. And you add in the sound of the wind and whatnot after, and the windows looked. You wrapped it in cellophane, and then we had Santa Claus snow that you can get during Christmas to put on your windows to make it look a little cheer. It's more of a California thing than here. You don't really need to buy that around here. But I had some from years ago and just sitting in my garage. And so we sprayed the windows with this stuff, and between the cellophane and the spray, it looked like the windows were frozen over. And so we shot all that in there indoors. It's a projection after that. We removed the window, because it was all one color. It doesn't always necessarily have to be. It's best with green, but you can do it as long as it's a solid color. You can do it with almost any color to where you pull something out. I have a friend from film school, lives in Thailand, so she knew how to find some very good but very inexpensive special effects people, and I took a phone, driving around the bleak countryside in the middle of winter, of just driving on roads and stuff, and I shot that and sent that footage to them, and they put it in to them driving around in the car.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the outside, of course, was real, but
yeah. But how cold was it? It looked really cold.
It was very cold. Our sound guy actually almost froze a couple of fingers off because he was from Chicago and he's in his 20s and he was trying to, impress us, I guess. And he's really good. Yeah, not wearing gloves. He was wearing gloves, but they weren't adequate. Yeah. They're Chicago, but not Fargo gloves. And luckily, my first AD, Jonathan Chittister, is a big guy who does it on the side. He's professionally something else, but he came over and helped me, and he found out what was going on, shut us down for a few minutes so we could all get in the cars and warm up, and keep everything.
So in real life, the car did have heat.
Yeah, the real life car had heat. The actors got to have some heat on the inside when they did do those shots. But yeah, we did 3 takes of them outside the car from different angles so that we could get different ones and shots, and I think by the third one they were pretty cold.
You sure this heater doesn't work?
I had to disconnect it for the USB charger, which I haven't hooked up yet.
So what about the deer, like the crash? Like, How was that? Because there's that one shot that's like sort of blurry, and you see this like deer rolling on the windshield.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Well, very quick cuts, and it's just that was actually one I'm kind of the most proud of, was in terms of like you make something work that's got to work. Yeah. We had tried to shoot our own deer. In fact, a year later, I went back to the same area and got some shots of deer and realized there were deer out there, but we couldn't find any when we were making the movie. Yeah. And so the shot that just kind of pans across the footprint of a deer was stock footage that we found somewhere. And the other shots of just bleak, that's actually outside the car. Those Fargo can look bleak. And but that shot where the deer, where they actually hit the deer, is just a deer running around that somebody caught on the internet in a neighborhood, and it was actually springtime. But I was able to filter the shot enough to make it look like winter.
That's my cousin Rudy, and that's me. We get along perfectly fine, but as far as my family, or should I say my mom and my aunt, not so much. My uncle tried to stop, but I guess after years of getting in the middle of it, he couldn't take it no more. But I figure we gotta come together for a funeral, right? Right?
I want to let y'all know tonight I'm glad for you.
Switching gears, I want to talk about More Money, More Family, because that was a funny movie. It kind of was like Friday a little bit. Yeah. So you were a producer on that?
Yes. I actually had, in my mind, a lot more to do than my final credit shows. But, it's... movies are a collaboration. And this one, it was actually a friend of mine named Charles, and he's in the credits too, who initially was part of the project, and the main backer and the main character in there is a guy named Silkk the Shocker. He's a rap artist who had a pretty good amount of cult following when he made that movie. But still is today. We originally filmed that in 2007, and he used a lot of people from my film school to save money, and we all were very interested in doing it because it was a good experience, the full-on feature. It was a real baptism of fire, as it were, a real crucible for people for me as a filmmaker, because a producer is supposed to organize either their portion of the project or the whole project. That's kind of what a producer is. People don't always know when it comes to the movies. What do you mean, you're a producer, huh? That's like project manager. You're in charge of making all of this work. Even the producer even hires the director usually. And,
so you were part of hiring the director?
Well, that's the thing. I came in after some of that had all been set up, but that's kind of the dynamic. You're supposed to be in charge of the budget. You're supposed to be in charge of everybody, and you help just move the train forward. What was wrong with More Money, More Family in that respect is when we come in, Silkk had hired the director before he came after us for crew. So this director ended up being more like the exec producer on it, but he didn't have that title and he didn't want that responsibility. And yet, he's directing it and organizing, the shot lists and the scheduling the days, which is usually something the director does anyway in collaboration with the producer. But since he kind of had the hat of I'm closest to Silkk, I got the money purses, it was difficult for us to try to organize around him because in the end, that's one of those things where like nepotism sometimes feels like something's wrong here. And I'm not trying to talk anybody down. This was just my experience at the time. We had a hard time just helping him understand what we needed. And it kind of comes out on screen a little bit. It turned out great, but it feels a little bit random sometimes because it was a little bit random. His major experience as a director before this was music videos. Make a music video, it's pretty sort of sunburst of creativity. You just get it, and this is all going to be edited together for just a single song that's happening over it. So you could okay, we're going to go over here to this garbage can and stand around and bang on it. All right, now we're going to go down to the beach and he's going to walk along and the wind's going to be in his hair, and then you put all that together. But when you're making a movie, there's each scene. You need you need these particular actors. You need this particular place. You need an understanding of how long it's going to take. And that's why you plan out a movie over a 3-week period, and each day or is a different location, and you've planned for that. He would call us up the night before. You know that scene in the warehouse? Why don't we just go over to the beach instead this time? Or let's go over to the house where the pool party is. Well, let's film that tomorrow. I'm feeling that. Yeah. Great, but we've scheduled the warehouse. Yeah. There's different actors at the warehouse than there are over here. And it was so we did a lot of that, but it came together really well. It took them a few years to find a distributor, so it didn't actually come out to 2015, which was great because me and Charles had both had other projects that we'd done that kind of counted for that time period. But we were feeling it's like, what are we doing next? Well, this movie comes out in 2015. Now it looks like we just barely did a movie in 2015, and helps us to when we get the next job, because it looks like we're still working through it. So it worked out all kind of nice, and it was fun. There were a lot of great comedians. One of the things that I did was, as a producer, wasn't just to organize the lines and stuff, but and the schedule, but also I was working directly with the actors, picking them up at the airport, taking them down, helping them be ready, and it was fun. And again, the car that he drives in that one, that his friend is giving him a rough time about, is that it's old, and what do you do with that? That was my Corvair. It's another old car that I had at the time.
Man, when you gonna get rid of that piece of Jurassic car?
Don't talk about my car. That right there, boy, is a classic. It's almost a 442.
Yeah, you right, almost, yeah. 4 wheels, 4 tires, and worth about $2 in book value.
One scene that made me laugh my off, they're going to buy cookout clothes, and he rises out of the clothing rack and tries to lure him out to his van.
I ain't hear that. Come now. What's going on in this? Man, what the you doing down there?
I'm here for your protection.
Protect us from what, man?
From these prices. This is the real crime. Meet me outside.
Do you have any backstory on that scene? That scene was so funny.
That scene is another one where the guy that played the actor was already a stand-up comedian on his own. He got a lot of his friends involved in that, and sometimes, again, like I said, random. They knew that they needed to be at the clothing store, but they just gave the guy free rein after that. And he just did that, and he followed around with the camera.
Hey, only been to Africa. Man, this is my phone. Give me this is my phone.
Look at that phone. It's a brand new phone. I just bought it.
Then have my mama number get in here.
Let me see that.
A picture right here, dude. That's
if that's your mother, that's my baby's mother. That means you're my son, and you are disrespecting me. I should slap you.
Well, give me child support. Give me child support.
I think it's less funny than the scene you're talking about. And again, I'm not trying to. It's just an example of the kid at the clothing store who's doing sort of a
Napoleon Dynamite. A
Napoleon Dynamite impression.
Are you guys gonna buy anything or what? You've been here for 2 flippin' hours.
Is he for real?
Hurry up.
What's that?
Nah, it couldn't be.
They can't actually say Napoleon Dynamite, but they're talking about, who's this guy? Is he doing this for real? That was a planned scene, and it's funny, but sometimes the stuff that they did in this particular movie that was random was even funnier, because they are all very funny people. And I am not a big believer in making the whole thing randomly. You want to have a story, but it wasn't my. I didn't write it. I was there to help them do their vision, and that's another thing a producer does is you realize what this is not the project you would have maybe have done yourself, but this is the project they've asked you to help with. So you are in charge of making their vision get put together too. It's not it's a collaboration. It's not your movie, so help them with theirs.
I've experienced that just editing a movie. I didn't write or direct it, and I thought it was a little bit of a mess, but then just trying my best to help, them tell their vision and also improve the movie and the edit.
A lot of things happen that are good for editing, and they did a good job putting that together in the end, because honestly, a lot of us on the set were like, well, we might never see this again. Yeah. But you got it out there.
So do you have anything coming up in the future? Are you working on anything right now?
Yeah, I have a couple of scripts that I wrote during the last couple of years. Sometimes when something hits me, the best way for me to get it out is to write it down. I did, for instance, Stay With Me. That was all typed from the beginning to end. But this last one, I wrote complete features just in a notebook. And I have gotten one of those finally onto the computer, and my friend Charles, actually the same friend from all the way back, More Money, More Family, stick with the people that you know sometimes, has interest in directing it. It's kind of a thriller. It's a mystery about this couple, the two married couples living in the same apartment complex. One's wife and the other one's husband both disappear, and they're the obvious thing seems to be that they ran off together because they were neighbors and they knew each other. But as the two leftover spouses start to try to figure it out, and particularly as the girl is trying to figure it out with the other guy, start to suspect that's not such a simple solution. Something else kind of sinister is going on, and it might not be a we're in this together kind of thing. She might be in it alone kind of thing, and so it's a fun thorough. We call it harmless, and basically the tagline on that is that just because somebody's never done anything to you doesn't mean they're harmless.
And then I looked on your IMDb, and there was one about a guy who's going to go to jail or something.
Yes, academic malfeasance, and it's called academic malfeasance because it's about a high school student who is getting ready to graduate, looks around, realizes, man, college is expensive. And all of my friends who've gone into college are now like hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. I don't want that for me. And he's looking around at his options and kind of stumbles across the idea and realizes that, if you go to prison, they give you free classes to better yourself. And there's guys that are in prison and get a full-on college degree. He's like, maybe I should just go to prison.
It's a funny idea.
I think it's still something that could be it could be a great movie. We were all set to go on that, and the financing fell apart. The whole corporation dissolved, and they didn't get in. They didn't get any of those projects got done. But it's still on there as in development. I looked into taking it off, but once you get something on IMDb, it's pretty hard to get it off. But I mean, who knows?
But it's a funny idea if you ever make it made, and it's relevant.
It could get made again. So we've still got anybody out there. We've still got all the investment portfolios and business plans for that one. So
I'll PA on it.
Yeah. Hey, why not?
So where can people watch these movies if they want to find them?
Stay With Me has been picked up by Seven Palms Entertainment, and they negotiate directly with a lot of streaming services. They're telling me it's going to be on Tubi soon. And Moment of Anger was never meant. I knew it was never going to become some huge streaming draw or anything. I've got that one on my Vimeo channel, and I believe it's unlocked currently. I've got a lot of stuff on there that I will lock and unlock. So if you go look for vimeo.com/player page, there's some of my stuff.
I'll put a link on the screen.
Yeah, some of my stuff is on there. Some of it's on YouTube, and some of it's just sitting in my drawer, waiting for me to go. But that is one thing about the film business now. I'd say to anybody that's again thinking like, "Oh, I can't get this done." There's the amount of content and the places to find it is just so much larger than it's ever been. That there used to be a joke or a saying really in the film business was like, somebody says they're a filmmaker, somebody says that they have this job, and people go, well, what have I seen that you're in? because there's only so much things in theaters, only so many things on TV. Somebody who claims to be an actor or a filmmaker is like, okay, well, what have I seen that you're in? Where is this project? And that was the sort of the snide. Okay, what have I seen that you're in? But nowadays, it's where can I see what you've done? Because if you're really working and you really are serious about working, there's going to be your content's going to be out there, and it's going to at least be available. Yeah. And I try my best to do that with my stuff, but you can't hide behind, oh well, I'm working on this project, or it's coming in a few years. You could be legitimate. Just point somebody to your content, show them how professional you are, and that's a big twist for a filmmaker today versus what it was before. Get your stuff out there. There's so many platforms.
Well, that's everything I got. I think that's a wrap. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
No problem. I had fun, and make movies.
Bow my head, break my gaze. Everything is clouded in a haze. I need a place where only dreams exist. A place where I decide my fate.